Boisterous bug crushers of Swift. At the end of part 1 of our Cloud Firestore lesson, where we were working with a collection inside of a document that's nested inside of another collection, we got our Firestore query property wrapper working to load reviews for an existing spot. But we also noticed that our app now crashes when we try to add a new spot. We'll fix this, and we'll learn about multi-button alerts, how to reset the Firestore query property wrapper, and we'll begin to refine our user interface so that it better reflects the options that we want to make available to the user as the data in our app changes. Let us commence the hack. Well, Swifters, at the end of part 1, our prior lesson, we got reviews working. We can now create a collection of reviews inside each spot document, and that collection will hold a document for each review of that spot. And this works fine if the spot already exists, but if we try to create a new spot, we get this rather glorious crash. Now, if we scroll up to the top of this numeric countdown, we can find out more information about this error, and in here it states, invalid path, spots / reviews, path must not contain / in them. And that's the same error that we see in red. Now, it's not very helpful that we see this show up in the main line in our code in the Snacktacular app file. That's actually not the line that's causing problems, but we can sleuth out this problem. If we head to Spot Detail View, the view we arrive at when we press the plus button from List View, that's when our crash occurs, we see in our onAppear that if the preview is not running, then we update the path using the spot.id. Now, this if statement works great in preventing the preview provider from crashing our code. The problem we're seeing is that spot.id is equal to nil when we create a new spot, because the ID won't be created by Cloud Firestore until the document has been saved. So an unsaved document is causing our crash. This nil coalescing in here turns spot.id into an empty string, and that's why we get spot / reviews. The empty string is actually showing up in between the two slashes between the collection spots and reviews, and that's no good. Remember, in Cloud Firestore, we need to alternate from collections to a valid document to collections, and we don't have a valid document between the slashes. We've got an empty string. So in here, we'll have to take a few steps to deal with this contingency. Right now, we deal with a case where we're not running in preview, but we also want to not execute our path update as shown down here if we don't have a valid spot ID. So we can prevent this crash by adding a compound conditional to our if statement &, followed by spot.id not equal to ! nil. And if you build and run, that'll fix the problem. And we can see that if we press the plus icon, we go to Spot Detail View without a crash, but we still have some problems that we need to address, because at this point, we still don't have an ID for our unsaved spot. If I click the Rate It button, we see we are at the review view, and if I click Save in here and look to the console, it says error spot.id equals nil and error saving data in review view. So, since a new spot needs an ID before we can add reviews, we'll need to ask the user if they want to save the spot before adding a review to a brand new spot. We'll do that by prompting the user with an alert like this one that gives the user the choice to save and move on, or to cancel and return to editing their current spot. And if so, then we'll have to save that brand new spot so that we can get an ID and then move to the review view if the spot was properly saved. Now, one more thing we'll also do in this lesson, if we save a new review by clicking on the Rate It button, we're also going to re-execute this path line here, because after saving we have a valid spot ID, and we want to use this to show any reviews that are created. If we don't do that, we won't see any new reviews that are added to this screen unless we first leave the screen, go back to the list view, and then return here. So showing an alert is very much like showing a sheet. We need a state boolean value to let SwiftUI know if it should or should not show the alert. So up top, we'll create a value with @state private var show save alert equals false. It's false because we don't want to initially be showing that alert. Then let's add our new alert below our sheet modifiers near the end of our main view. So we'll type .alert and select the option that has the parameters for title key, is presented, actions, and message. Then press return. And the title key is the title that'll show up in the alert box in bold. The message goes below this, so our title will be cannot rate place unless it is saved. And by the way, Apple offers very complete user interface guidelines on things like capitalization. For example, on this page it states, if the title is a sentence fragment, which ours is, use title style capitalization and don't add ending punctuation. So title style capitalization puts a capital letter in each major word of the title. Now we'll also be adding a message, and down here, Apple says, if you need to add an informative message, keep it as short as possible using complete sentences, sentence style capitalization, where the first letter of the sentence is capitalized, and appropriate punctuation. Now, the alert wants a binding value, so we'll enter $ show save alert, then tab to action, and press return to get the action and message closures. And down here for the message, we just want to pass in a text view, and this should say, would you like to save this alert first so that you can enter a review, ? And for the action, this is where we add our alert buttons. So we'll start first by adding a cancel button, and this time I'm going to select a button that has 3 parameters: title, role, and action. So the title is going to be cancel. The role will place the buttons in a location appropriate for Apple's human interface guidelines. So if I press period here, one of the options is cancel. For iOS, that's going to place the cancel button on the left, then press return. And actually, we don't need to do anything special for the cancel. We just need to bring the user back to the spot detail view screen where they were entering the new spot, so we can just add open and close curlies for the action here. And below this, we'll add our save button, again selecting the option with title, role, and action. The title is going to be save. The role will be .none. So the other option that we have in here is destructive, and Apple usually highlights destructive buttons in red, and you'll usually provide that as another visual cue if you were to do something like delete data, for example. Then tab over and press return for our action closure. And now in here, this is where we're going to execute our save function. And this is going to be very similar to the code that we executed when we clicked on the save button in the navigation bar. So we need to start this off with a capital T task, open and close curlies. And inside, we're going to call the spot view model's save spot function. And this returns a bool indicating if the save was successful or not. So we'll start this off with let success equals, and this is an async function, so we need to add the await keyword here. Then spotvm.saveSpot. Code completion reminds us, yep, it's an async function returning a bool. We've already taken care of that. And the spot that we're going to pass in is just lowercase spot. Then below this, we'll say, if success, open and close curlies, else open and close curlies. And if we're successful, we want to show that review sheet. And we do this simply with showReviewSheet.toggle. Else, if this doesn't work, we'll print out an error message, angry emoji, dang, error saving spot. So now that we've set up our alert, very important, make sure we toggle the save alert on if we need to. So to do this, we'll head up to the button action for the rate it button, and up here we'll enter if spot.id = nil, open and close curlies, else open and close curlies, and we'll cut out the show review toggle here and place it in the else condition, because if we click rate it and we don't have a nil spot ID, then we can go right to the review view, and this toggle displays that sheet. But if we do have a nil for spot.id in the if clause, we need to say show save alert.toggle. That'll invoke the alert that we just wrote. Now, before we build and run, I want to address one other issue. Right now, if we save a new spot, we don't pass our ID property back to the state variable spot that we're using on this view. We pass that spot value into our save spot function, but remember, when we pass a value into a function, it goes in as a constant. And we want to make sure that we've updated our spot ID with the newly created spot ID if we've saved properly. So here's how we'll do this. Let's head over to our spot view model. And I'm also noticing as we get in here that we don't have @main_actor up top, so we should be sure to add that to make sure that we don't get any of those purple errors that would show up from inappropriately executing UI-related code outside of the main thread. And now let's make sure that we can get the spot.id value that this add document Firestore function is going to create. And then we want to make sure that we update the spot state variable with this new variable. Now we might refactor this technique that we're using here a little bit later, but for now this should work fine. So first, this gives us a chance to see what this mystery value is that's returned by the add document function. This function gives us back a value and we haven't done anything with it, but what this creates is something called a document reference. Now this suddenly becomes useful for us because the document ref value that's passed back by add document contains a document ID property, and that's the name of the document that add document just created. And we use that document ID as the ID property for our spot. So before the try statement here in this line that has the add document in it, make sure you're in the right line. This is the only place where we're concerned with getting a new document ID because this is the only place where a new document ID is created. We'll add let document ref equals in front of this. Then we'll write a couple of lines below. On the first line below this, we'll say self.spot equals spot. And remember, when we refer to self.spot, we're referring to the class property up here. This one is published, so as soon as we make changes to it, those changes are going to be available in the view. And the spot without the self down here is the spot that we pass into the saveSpot function. And remember, that's a constant. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, any of the values that we passed in as the constant spot here, those are the latest updates that are on the view. Make sure we update our published property. Now below this, we need to update the one property of self.spot, which we didn't get from spot because that's a constant. And that property is the document ID, the name of the document that we just saved with add document, and we can get at that with documentref.documentID. So we just say self.spot.id equals documentref.documentID, and at this point, the published property spot in this view model that we refer to here as self.spot has everything that the user updated on the interface that we passed in as spot, plus that document ID, the ID property, the name of the document that we just saved as add document. So now that we've got the spot view model spot property updated with the latest good stuff, including a valid ID property, let's head back to spot detail view, and we'll use this to update our spot state value. After we call the saveSpot function, we'll say spot equals spotvm.spot. And again, we might refactor this for even more efficiency later, but right now, I'd like to keep working with the code that we've been writing. Hopefully you're following that and understand it. So let's build and run and try this out. So I'll add a new spot with plus, then look up a place, choose your favorite new place. I'll choose Little Big Diner in Newton Center, a great place for ramen. And we've updated our information and we have a new spot, but we haven't saved it. We don't yet have a spot ID, so I'm going to click on Rate It Anyway to review this new spot. The app displays this alert since we don't have a valid spot ID for this unsaved spot. This has the title and message that we passed in. If we click Cancel, we do nothing and head back to spot detail view, but if we click Rate It again and then click Save, we see the baby chick emoji in the console stating that the data was added successfully. So we're in the review view for Little Big Diner, and I can rate this very good ramen. If they have the chicken banh mi, get it, click Save. The data is added successfully, no errors, but we see some more things that we need to change in here. One is that the review that we just added isn't showing up. Now, if you go back to Cloud Firestore and check, you can see we have a spot document for Little Big Diner. Yep, we did indeed add this new review. It's not showing up though because we have to update our path value for that Firebase query wrapped value spots that we create here with the new ID after we save it. Remember down here in onAppear, we skip over updating the path if we don't have a valid spot.id, and so we aren't getting any of the reviews in here because we started out with spot.id equal to nil. But once we have saved our spot, we have a valid ID, so what we need to do is use this same statement in here where we update our path with the new spot.id, and that's going to make sure that our reviews show up. And I'll show you how we can do that. Now also notice that the cancel and save buttons that were in the toolbar went away. That's because we're showing our hiding cancel and save based on whether or not spot.id was nil. So since we just saved spot.id, it's no longer nil. And when you think about what we want in here, well, if we just saved our spot, we don't want the toolbar to say cancel or save because we've already saved the spot. And remember, in this case, we're not allowing the user to resave a spot once it's been saved because they could change the location or the restaurant name and move reviews from one restaurant to another. We don't want that. So it would probably be better if we had a single button up here that said something like close or return, or we'll create a button that just says the word done. Now we do have the properly disabled name and address text fields up here, so that's working well. And we've also removed the toolbar in the bottom, which had the look up place button. We don't want to be able to change the place. So what we're really going to need to do now is to test for two conditions. So if we're showing the sheet, and this happens if we start by adding a new value, a new spot, remember when we click on plus from our list of spots, that's going to bring up the sheet. But if we click on an existing spot, we transition from left to right in the full screen using a navigation link. So if we're showing as a sheet and we haven't yet saved a valid spot, then we have nil in our ID property, then we should be showing the cancel and save buttons. But if we started off showing the sheet, but we saved so we no longer have a non-nil spot ID property, then we should just display a button to indicate that we can close the screen. We'll create a done button for that. So let's set this up now. Now I'm back at the top of the spot detail view, and I want to create a bool that will state whether or not we're displaying this view in a sheet or a navigation link. So I'll do this with @state private var showing as sheet, and I'll initially set this to false. Then if we need to, we'll update this value down in onAppear. So we're going to add an else condition to our first if statement here. That's the statement that checks to see if the preview is not running and the spot.id is not equal to nil. And in here, this is where we're setting showing as sheet equal to true. So this else clause will execute if we have spot.id equal to nil. That's actually also the case if we're running in the preview provider, but we really care about what happens when we're running in the app and our spot.id is equal to nil. And when we run in the preview provider, we don't have a value in for the spot.id anyway, so it's going to look like we're adding a new spot. Then let's head down to our toolbar so we can control if we should be showing the cancel and save button to save a spot or done because we've already saved a new spot. So just below the .toolbar modifier here, we're going to add if showing as sheet, open and close curlies, and if we're showing as sheet, then we're creating a new spot. So we want to show the cancel and save buttons as well as the lookup place button in the toolbar at the bottom. So we want to highlight this large if clause, the one that starts with if spot.id equals nil, and this goes all the way through the two toolbar items in the one toolbar item group. Make sure you get the proper closing curly for the if statement. And I'll cut those out with Command X and paste them in between the curlies I just created in if show as sheet. And I'll Command A and Control I so that I can fix my indents, and it looks like all my errors have gone away. Nice. And now let's head up to our onAppear clause. I want to copy the line that has the $rating.path update. Earlier I'd mentioned that if we are adding a new spot but then click on rate it, then we save the new spot, so we go from having no spot.id to having a valid spot ID because it's been saved. Then we're going to need to reset the path property of the reviews variable. Now that value is the one that we set up with the @Firestore query property wrapper. We never set this up properly because we didn't have a proper spot.id. So with this $reviews.path line highlighted, copy it. Then we'll head down to our alert and look inside the button action for the save button. And if we have success, then inside the if success clause, I'm going to paste in that line that I just copied just above where I toggle show review view sheet. And to remind us of what we're doing here, I'm going to put in a comment, if we didn't update the path after saving spot, we wouldn't be able to show new reviews added. So now our interface gets a little complicated here. If we went from creating a brand new spot to, based on clicking on the rate it button and then the save button, saving that new spot, we want to make sure that we don't make any further changes to that spot. And again, we do that to make sure that somebody can't take the reviews from one spot and make it seem like they're showing up in another spot. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of the cancel and save button and just show a done button in the upper right or navigation trailing position. So to do that, in our toolbar area, for our second if statement here, the one that starts with if spot.id equals nil, we're going to turn this into a complex conditional by adding $& for and showing as sheet. So if we have a nil spot.id and we're showing as sheet, then we should show the cancel and save buttons in the navigation bar, and we should show the toolbar down below so that we can look up a place. Otherwise, we only want to show a done button in the upper right. So we need to add an else clause after this compound if statement. And it's going to be tricky to find out where this is. I first made a mistake. Don't do what I'm doing right now. I code folded around the if statement and I put this in the wrong place. I could tell there was a problem because code completion wasn't working properly. Then the technique that did work properly, and you should try this, is code fold the two toolbar items and also the toolbar item group. Then I could clearly see where this innermost if statement closing curly was. That's where I want to say else if, and I just pasted it in because I cut it out from where I originally put it in the wrong place, but you should start to type this in. Showing as sheet, $, spot.id does not equal to nil, then open and close curlies. So if this is true, then I must be looking at a spot that started out as a new spot, but has since been saved using rate it and then the save button in the alert. So if this is true, we want to create toolbar item. We want to select the option with placement in content, and the placement is going to be .navigation trailing, tab over to content and press return for trailing closure. And in here, I'm going to enter a button with title key and action. The title key is going to be done, tab over, press return for trailing closure. And the action is going to be simply dismiss, open and close parens. And it looks like I've got everything right. The errors went away. So let's go ahead and build and run. Hammer time. No errors. And let's click the plus to add a new spot. We see that we present all of our new spots as a sheet, and we've got a cancel and save button in our navigation bar above. We can enter a name and an address if we'd like, or we can look up a place. I'll click look up place, and how about Neptune Oyster? That's in the north end of Boston, Boston's Little Italy, so this is good. We still haven't saved this, so at this point our spot.id is still nil. We can continue to change the name or the address or look up a new place if we selected the wrong one, but if I click on rate it, I'm now shown an alert that says I can't rate a place unless I save it. So I'm going to click save, and if you look down in the console, you can see the baby chick emoji with our message that says data added successfully. So at this point, we've got a new spot ID, we saved our spot, it's going to be okay to add a new review. And this is a 5-star joint, loves me some bivalves, be sure to try the vinegar sauce, and watch what happens when I press save. Ooh, so I just press save, my spot.id at this point is legitimate, it's no longer nil. That actually happened when I pressed save in alert, but I noticed the results of this. The navigation bar no longer says cancel and save, it says done. We also can no longer get in here to edit the address or the name of the spot. We no longer have a toolbar down below where we can change the name of this place. We wouldn't want to do that if we've been reviewing a given spot. And at this point in our code, we've also updated our reviews.path value, so our @Firestore query property wrapped value named reviews is showing our new review in the list down below. Very nice. Now we can click back on this review. Now there are some additional user interface issues that we're going to need to address. For example, we see a back button plus a cancel and a save here. We don't want that. We should only show cancel and save if the user has posted this review themselves, and we should not show cancel or save. We should only show back if somebody is looking at a review that they themselves did not post, and they should not be able to edit somebody else's review. We'll handle how to do this in the next lesson. We'll also update the list of reviews here so that we have a second line below the review title, and that's going to include the star ratings plus the first line of the review body. Our done button does close the sheet. We can head back to our list, and this next time we click on Neptune Oyster, we're not showing this as a sheet because we clicked on navigation link. That navigates us in from the right side as a full sheet. Nice. So Swifter, we got a real solid look in here of the various ways you might need to update a user interface if your data editing conditions change while you're interacting with the app, but we solved all of our major problems. Get ready for our next lesson where we'll clean up some of our user interface issues. Keep hacking!